Thank you for joining us. Columbian's editorial board is pleased to welcome State Representative Sharon Wylie, running for re-election in the 49th District. We did invite your challenger, Brett Graham, and he was unable to join us today, but we're happy to speak with you. I'm Greg Jane. I'm the editorial page editor, and I'll let the other editorial board members introduce themselves.
Hi again, Sharon. I'm Colleen Keller, assistant news editor of the Columbian and member of the editorial board.
Me?
Sure.
Ben Campbell, I'm publisher and co-owner of the Columbian.
I'm Craig Brown. I'm the editor of the Columbian and Columbian.com.
And now we'll move on to the candidate. And please just take 1 to 2 minutes to introduce yourself, explain why you are running again, and then we'll move on to specific policy questions. So go ahead.
Well, thank you for doing this. I'm Sharon Wylie. I was first appointed in 2011 to fill a vacancy. I'm currently serving on the transportation, finance, regulated substances and gaming, and I'm the one of the House representatives on the State Arts Commission. I've been honored to be elected multiple times since I was first appointed. I've concentrated on a number of things. I'm more of a generalist than a specialist, but I've been very, very involved in the resurrection of the effort to replace the I-5 bridge. And it's not built yet. So there are still decisions to be made and public input to be received. And I've been there since before I was elected. When I was the county's government relations person, I attended the meetings leading up to the failure of the effort. God, it must be 20 years ago that it actually started. And for several years, I was at the table, not at the table, but observing that process. And I was one of the sponsors of the bill to resurrect the process, to try to use whatever data was valid so that both states, Oregon and Washington, would not have to pay money back. So that piece of my work doesn't feel complete yet. And I like to concentrate on problems that aren't being addressed. And we have a state where there is no county, rural or otherwise, that doesn't have human coliform in some of their wells because of the lack of septic systems that work and sewer systems. And local governments can't do that by themselves. And so I'm going to be seeking a way, probably first steps, because that's going to be a long-term statewide kind of idea. But we spend a lot of money on fish. And when things roll downhill that you don't want to talk about, and you don't do anything about it, and the county health department has so much on their hands that their budget doesn't extend to the kind of inspections that need to be done, just keep people healthy, keep our water clean. I think that's a problem that's going to require a lot of sustained effort from a lot of different people. So those are the two main reasons. I love the job. I learn something new every single day, and I've been there long enough that in some ways I'm an institutional memory, and we have so much turnover. I feel more appreciated because I can tell people why things are. So that's, I can share the history, and that's important to me.
Great, thank you. And thanks again for joining us. I want to start with one of the big issues, and one that the legislature paid some attention to this year, is housing and homelessness. Have we done enough? What should be the next steps for the legislature?
We will never have done enough. And there are multiple causes of homelessness. The simple and true, a simple and true statement is that we haven't built enough affordable housing. Affordable housing isn't profitable enough. We have a steady increase in population, and there are two factors that I believe, and nobody's ever been able to dispute that with me. There are two factors that started a direction about 50 years ago that I think are culminating in where we are right now. One is the federal government got out of the housing business and devolved everything, a whole lot of things, including transportation, to the states. And so states had to step up. At the same time, states were rightly shutting down the hellhole statewide mental institutions with the promise of locally based services so that people could stay close to their families and they could transition. And so that was another thing. And very, it seems like not very long ago to me, but it's a long ago for other people. There was a campaign against government. And so when it came to housing, there was a belief that government was a problem. They didn't have any solutions and the private sector could take care of everything. So we didn't have subsidized housing. We had vouchers. We had private sector stepping up, and they were quite glad to fill their vacancies with people that had caseworkers and benefits and stable income because they were on Social Security disability. They were real glad to have somebody else take care of fixing something if a mentally ill person decompressed and damaged the house. So there was an abdication without the resources and intent to step up in the communities. And now we have drugs that are worse than ever. We have, I think, pain and misinformation that's amplified and demonization. And we have 50 years of people watching television and being removed and thinking all this is happening and I can't do anything about it. And Robert Putnam, who's done a lot of research, and I'm sure somebody at this table has heard of him, did a lot of research on why nobody's volunteering. It's because we're removed and we don't think we can do anything. And so we've got a gap in volunteers, and needing two incomes to keep a family afloat doesn't help the volunteer options either. So I see a lot of things that are connected. I'm not saying there's a conspiracy, but I think our state has done better than most, and our community has done much better than most. We voted for housing bond twice now, and the state, every single session for the last 14 years, and then even when I was just a lobbyist, has done something to make some flexibility so that local solutions could be tried, innovation could continue, and that not every community, not everything works for every community. And so there is always a tweak of our housing options and our ability to do partnerships and fund specialized housing.
Along those lines, is it something that the legislature can fix by promoting housing, or to promote the private sector to fill that gap?
All of that is true. We allow more partnerships. We allow and encourage tax preferences. But if you're going to build a big project to house a lot of people, you almost need a rocket scientist to put together the strands of funding, because no one pot of money can do the job. And so you have business people that they believe in it, they want to do it, but it doesn't pencil out the way they think it should. So there are partnerships, there are incentives, there are different methods. We loosen the rules on infill development. And circling back to my obsession with our sewers, building 8 tiny houses on in a well-developed, older, aging infrastructure city on a single family tax lot has implications for the water and sewer lines underneath. And that adds to the cost. That makes it more costly. So I think that we need to take a really comprehensive approach.
Okay, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit more. As you noted, you were a key person in resurrecting the Interstate 5 Bridge project. And talk about a little bit where it's at now. What more do you think the legislature needs to do, or do you feel like Washington is pretty set where the bridge project is concerned?
Well, I think the tolling piece got shifted from Oregon back to Washington, and we have experience. We've made our mistakes in big tolling systems up in Puget Sound. And it has, and I was there watching, you know, on the transportation committee. I was first vice chair then, but so, you know, we're working that out. There are still things to be decided, and there are still people that have an idea or two that they think will solve all the problems without doing the things that the experts have done. And we created a bi-state committee, which I've been on from the beginning. It's Oregon and Washington, both parties equally. And our job, we actually don't have a fixed approval role the way that the federally mandated and state mandated committees and experts and engineering and plan, all that has, there are a whole lot of procedures and processes to go through. Ours, in simple terms, was to make sure that our legislative bodies wouldn't be surprised and kill it at the last minute and cause both states to pay back millions and millions of federal dollars that they used to get that far.
Do you think there is any chance that the new bridge will be a drawbridge?
No.
No. You stake your reputation on that.
If people are complaining about the cost now, the cost of that kind of engineering and the upkeep of that kind of mechanism would be a real problem. And there are not that many tall things that go under the bridge. There's a sweet spot that takes account of the height of barges and the path of airplanes to Pearson and to Portland. There is a sweet spot, and it's not perfect. There is nothing that's going to be perfect about this bridge, except that it will be the best that we can do. And one of my colleagues across the aisle says the best bridge is the one that gets built. And leaders in the Coast Guard and the Transportation Department change. And so there are new people to educate and new people that want to look at everything that has been done and every decision that has been made. And that adds to it. And there have been changes. There's more attention to equity. There is more truck traffic that is not going anywhere but between the ports and in the city. There isn't a workaround. And there is a path for a third bridge that will work, but we have to do one thing at a time. This is so expensive. We've got to do that next.
Do you have any concerns that the makeup of the legislature might change next year and more anti-bridge people will come in?
No.
Okay. So no concern about having
I've
to
had
fight
a lot.
all
I've had
these battles
enormous,
again.
as first vice chair of transportation, the people in other parts of the state call me one of the bridge people. And we've passed legislation to make this the project in the whole state, the project of statewide significance. And Bob Schaefer, who was once Speaker of the House, who died a couple of years ago, but until he died, he was still following this project. 50 years ago, he tried to get a path for a third bridge before it was as built out as it is now. But we have designated this a project of statewide significance. And we got the vote. We had the votes to pledge $1 billion of our money, and then Portland stepped up as well. And none of that is easy. In the old days, we got to cut the ribbon and sign the proclamation, but all the money came from Washington, D.C. Now states have to pony up, and it's more expensive.
Thank you. Right.
Sure. I'm going to ask a little bit of an off-the-wall question.
I like those.
There's a lot of opportunities for gambling now, so you can gamble online. There's casinos in Washington that are run by the tribes. So why should the state still be in the gambling business? And should the system be changed somehow that the state runs?
I think the history is that the state abdicated most gambling to the tribes. And there's always new tricks to be pursued. And the tribes, we treat them as sovereign nations as well. We should. So there somewhere back in history, there was a distinction between the lottery and everything else. And we're not the only state to be there. I think that there are other upsetting the apple cart issues that I would be more interested in pursuing than revisiting that. The most recent issue was we should have sports betting online like other states do. The tribes feel that that is an incursion into their, and there is a gambling commission. The tribes are better than casinos at putting money into problem gambling and doing serious work on that, and they do it voluntarily. They put a significant amount of their revenue into problem gambling. I'm a co-chair of the Regulated Substances and Gaming Committee, which has, with the entrance of cannabis into the market legally, it went from a sleeper committee where you rubber stamp the Gambling Commission and the Liquor Control Board, a policy, and their boards and staff made policy, and then the legislature blessed it. It's gotten a lot more complicated and more significant, and there's a lot of money involved to the state. There is the policy issue, which I don't think anybody there. I don't think there's a good cohesive policy for our state on how we deal with every issue that comes out of the fact that there are substances that are severely damaging and toxic for some, but not all people. And there is a residue of prohibition in our systems. There is a fear of anything that might be a gateway addiction with the fentanyl crisis. And we have a lot of people in recovery that are in the legislature, people that help people in recovery, and people whose families have died or been damaged by addiction. And what we're really talking about is addiction and public health ramifications of that. So most of the people I talk to, and myself, I speak for myself, are comfortable having most gambling be in the tribal arena in our state. There are some people that might be rethinking that because they don't like that, because they want to make money off of it too. There are new things like sports betting where people think, well, we don't have it, therefore it's up for grabs. It's not that simple. And most things aren't, sadly.
Right, anything else?
No,
Ben?
Yeah, so Sharon, you sit on a number of committees and you have a lot of institutional wisdom. What's an important issue that people aren't talking about that they should be?
Well, the one I've focused in on is the fact that doing matching money for water treatment systems for cities is not doing the job. We have an old failing system that's not even being inspected. You know, we have houses, both poor houses and rich houses, with failing septic systems in our community. And it goes right down Salmon Creek, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's what we have. And we don't have the people and the resources from the county. They're supposed to inspect it, and they're not doing enough. They don't want the pushback from people. My first job when I moved from Seattle to Oregon a long time ago was to go out and take abuse during the mid-county sewer project, where the state, Multnomah County and Gresham, all that area in between, all septic, no sewers at all. And the state gave Multnomah County a mandate and carrots and sticks to get it done. And people didn't want to get it done. And it was purposeful for a long time because of the Mazama flood. You know, hundreds of feet of boulders and gravel. But there were backup wells there too, and industrial waste and all kinds of other things. And they stepped up and they did it. And my job was to go out and talk to angry people who had apartment complexes on septic. So, people don't want to talk about it. And so, that's, that's the big one that's front of my mind. But there, it depends on who you ask. I mean, because everybody has their places where they don't want to go.
Yeah.
Or they think it's so hopeless.
I mean, with the sewer problems, how do we begin to tackle that issue?
Well, I've already begun. I've got the health directors from every county really interested. I've got a lot of people whose priority is environment. I've started to reach out to individual real estate and developer folks. If the state could do a cost-effective, long-term, maybe a special bond in order to, over time, we couldn't do it overnight even if we had the money, but to make sure that water quality was safe, that there was enough done and enough in the system to upgrade where we need to. I think it's doable. And I will be starting with something formal to do an inventory and then find out what counties don't have an inventory. I know they're out there.
So when you say something formal, you mean you'll be introducing legislation to, okay.
Yeah. It's been conversation and taking notes and having a lot of people agree with me. Now it's time to get it in writing and get it considered. I'd like to see it be a priority of the, after the election, both caucuses will set priorities. But our Clark County caucus, we talk a lot and we work together real well. And I've had people on the other side of the aisle saying, that sounds like an idea I'm interested in, and keep me posted.
Has that collaboration improved during the time you've been in the legislature among the Southwest Washington delegation?
I would say it's improved enough that it stays solid even when we don't have dinner every other Tuesday night like we did at one time. We do get together, and I would say it's definitely improved, but it's not as formal as it used to be. We back each other up on capital budget. We keep each other posted on what's going on. We ask each other for help. We back projects in each other's districts. And we sort of pinky swear at the beginning that whatever happens in the election, we will do what we need to do in a partisan way and work with whoever gets elected. We sort of, have a verbal agreement that I'm not worried about anybody abdicating it that I know of. Elections aren't over yet.
In the past, 15, 20 years or so, the state budget has doubled, essentially. Are the people of Washington getting twice the services that they once did? Has that been a reasonable increase to the budget?
Well, you're asking a big picture person about some details. I think one of the details is that the state has taken on things that the federal government used to do. Devolution is a real thing. I once was a guest speaker for the Kellogg Foundation on that very subject a long time ago. So it's not something that happened overnight. And there are few people doing public policy that were alive and paying attention when it was otherwise. So it's been going on a long time. So that a lot of the things that the state thinks are important. And, over time, I have decided that there's the only difference between a Republican and a Democrat is how they answer two questions. What is the proper role of government and how does the economy work? It covers just about everything you can think of. And the proper role of government for the last 20 years in our state has been led or dominated, depending on your perspective, by the Democrats. And we're also in our world having a rapid change. Better communication makes us notice problems more. We have more data on what things help or don't help. You know, just as we started kind of getting out of social services in some respects, we had better data on what kinds of interventions actually help people permanently. And so, you know, we actually know a lot. There's a huge amount of data on what helps people become self-sufficient, what helps people learn to save money, what helps people learn to get a job and succeed in that job. We know more, but there are really fewer resources, mainly because the federal government has backed away a lot of the time. And, you know, we were able to do more during the pandemic because the federal government stepped up. The other thing that I must mention is taxation on corporations and very wealthy people was so much bigger in the 50s. When we built our infrastructure, the bridges that are failing now, who paid taxes was vastly different. It's now on the middle class. It's not on the richest of the rich or the most successful corporations. And the most successful corporations walk away from what they do owe by doing, you know, amazing things with international banking. I mean, there's a lot that has changed, and part of it has been who pays, and the middle class pays, and it used to be corporations and wealthy people. The tax rate for income tax for income is greatly shifted over the last 50 years.
Yeah. What is your view on the current funding formula for our public schools? It's been a lot of discussion. I'm sure you're aware of this election cycle that the legislature, perhaps it's time to revamp the school funding formula. What is your view on that?
I absolutely, I believe that there will always be a need to review and take a good, thorough, honest look at what's going on. I do believe that there will always be inequities and tension. And part of that, and people don't talk about this very much, is our schools are a complex arrangement and balance between local decision-making and state decision-making and state funding. And so there are things that get voted in at the local level, and there's people, the people on the school boards have enormous discretion on how they can spend the money that the state allocates. And then people get into the legislature and everybody's an expert. Everybody there went to school. So therefore they know everything. And if they have kids, they went to school twice.
Yeah.
Right? And so they know whatever would have worked for their kid or themselves is what should be school policy. And if you look at human development, you know, you can have a lot of different kinds of parent teams. But one of the most important thing is consistency. And if you change policy every year, those kids' development is going to be affected. So the school funding's attention, and we have counties that they don't have a tax base. They cannot fund their part of it. And so when we do our funding formula, we have to make sure those rural counties that have a lot of federal land, they get enough money to keep their schools open. And it's more expensive for them in some respects because they may not have the problems, and many of the special needs kids may be in a city, but they still have transportation and other issues. They still have, getting workers, teachers. There's a lot, of balancing that has to go on. And it's complex enough that we do need to look at it. And we have to educate the legislature every election because there's huge turnover. And remember, the turnover is, I mean this in a friendly way. The new puppies have to be trained. They have to learn that the competition of a campaign is not the same thing as the collaboration and knowledge of governing and problem solving. And some of those campaigns are a grudge skate at the roller derby, and some are a chess match. It's competition versus collaboration.
Regarding the school funding, has the capital gains tax made much of a difference?
Absolutely, and we've some interesting things, and I give credit to the Republican side of the aisle for keeping more capital budget potential back, not using it all in good times so that there is some to be used in bad times to get people back to work and to fill needs that can't be filled any other way. So the capital budget and the capital gains tax is another, capital budget is never quite enough because there's a lot of hands out for that. The capital gains tax has been very important because we knew it was going to be somewhat volatile. We knew that. And so some of it goes to early childhood education. So it bolsters the things that have been increasingly important that there's never enough money for. And if we can help make those buildings safer and more up to date that need to be changed and use some of that capital gains money, that's a good thing. If it goes away, those things have to wait, and we have to find money for the gaps in early childhood development. And like I said, it's a balancing act, and I don't know of any program or idea that ever gets what it thinks it needs, ever.
Would you support codifying abortion access in the Constitution?
Absolutely. To some degree, I think it already is. We have one of the most protected rights in the country. And we also, I'm very proud of some of the things that we've done. And we were the first state to address the data healthcare privacy. What we've had over the last several years, and you may or may not know this, is people that are tracking data, healthcare data, in order to go after people from their state that have had abortions and providers that are offering them, and they the internet companies that are collecting this data and putting it together, and we're talking composite data that gives a picture. For instance, they sell the data that your massage therapist would lose their license if they shared it with anybody. It went all around behind HIPAA, and they were selling it to what I think are bad actors who are then finding out which young woman buys tampons and then stops and then visits and does a search for an abortion doctor. And where does she live? And who's the doctor? And they buy that data. And we passed a law with the leadership of Ferguson and the best people on his staff and my good friend Vandana Slatter. We passed the first law in the country to say, you can't do that. You can't do that. And Microsoft and Google and all of the companies that we have that gather that search data, they agreed. They were tough. They said, we're not the bad actors, and we don't want you to interfere with our business, but we're good people. We would never do that, blah, 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 blah. They do it. They all do it. And so we made concessions. They agreed to on the House side. It went over to the Senate, and they started all over again. Their agreement didn't stay, but it got done. It got done in a bipartisan way. No other state had done it up to that point.
Sure. The state's been making some amazing investments in transportation, so electrifying ferries, transit, those kinds of things, but the pavement on I-5 is really terrible. Why can't the state fix I-5? And should that even be a priority to get rid of some of those potholes out there?
There are parts of I-5 that are always shut down to be paved. It's lack of money. One of the things I'm proudest of was the work we did on the last package. We have never put more money into repairs, into roads and highways. And we gave some of that additional money to cities and counties for their piece of it. But we proportion more money to maintenance. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about potholes. And we are improving the stage at which we address those. If you let them go too far, it's more expensive. And that kind of patching, frankly, the Department of Transportation has had trouble getting workers. So, there are a lot of moving pieces in that, and we are doing better. We did not raise the gas tax, and the gas tax is what we use on roads,
Sorry, not the
freeways.
highest in the country.
Yeah, because we can't use it for anything else, and it's diminishing. We have more cars that get better mileage, and we haven't reached the point where we can tip over into a miles traveled system yet. And I think that might be the only thing that seems fair if people can get past the things they object to about it. And there are multiple ways of doing that, and they're being tested in our state and other states.
Are we getting our fair share of that money down here? The only thing I see on I-5 is they paved some on-ramps and off-ramps, and so they put a bus lane on I-5 southbound, and that's the only paving I've seen done in 20 years.
I'll have to get back to you with a list. There's been a lot more than
It
that.
seems like we don't, there's.
That's
Highway
what
14's
you
a
noticed.
mess. It's terrible.
And my priority hasn't just been the I-5 bridge, Highway 14, and the bridge going into Kamas-Washougal is a high priority for all of our delegates, all of our delegation. And we made progress. Most transportation, the priorities are actually set at the local level to some degree. And our RTC is a key organization for that, and all the electeds, every entity in our region has a seat at that table.
So in our current polarized political atmosphere, what approach do you feel like is best in order to create consensus and to get things done?
I want to preface my answer with, we're not the other Washington at all. Washington has a functional government. And I have a lot of facilitation training with the National Institute for Civil Discourse. And I've gone to other states to train legislators, and they pair you up with somebody your political opposite who's been through the same training. And the key is, listening more and talking less, and making sure you understand, and knowing people well enough that you have shared values. And that means bearing your throat a little bit and being vulnerable yourself. And people are so afraid. People in my position, even at a local level, are afraid of saying things that will be distorted or half-baked, come out of their mouth half-baked, and be reported by the media. And the reality is that there's too many of us, and we're not that important to be quoted all the time. But the reality is that people are afraid of the risk of ideas that may not work, so they hold them close. And a lot of ideas, people come into the legislature and they don't know what's already been tried and failed. They don't know what they're complaining about that's already being fixed. It takes time to find those things out, and and it's a humbling experience. Trust me, it is. But I think, Sam Hunt and I were the trained facilitators that were part of the program. And the National Institute for Civil Discourse was created after Gabby Giffords was shot by Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush. Okay, it's still in operation. And I didn't get appointed to the governor's civil committee. Somebody else did. But I am invited to sit in, and one of their first meetings, their online meetings, was one of the people I trained with, who's in Ohio, who's part more active than I am. And so they're using some of the same things, and what they're using has actually been grown and improved since I last had my training. So everybody's working on it. I'm talking to Carolyn Long. She does a lot with her job in looking at the issues of civility. I have spearheaded, since Jim Mueller passed, and since he left the legislature, I have spearheaded the odd couple dinner, where we have to invite the most opposite person we aren't on a committee with or don't sit next to anywhere to dinner as our date. And we have some real fun times. And I put a team together, people that haven't done it before, and so far nobody's wanted to take it away from me. It used to rotate, and I'm willing to give it up. But people say this is a really good thing. Other states don't do that. I mean, none of the states that I facilitated at have that. We call it the odd couple dinner at night, and we only do it after the big during the long session, because there's never enough time, and it's never 100%. And the civil discourse workshops that we do are self-selecting. You've got people that are already there. And I think that I have a reputation of being able to work with people. And I think part of that comes from my commitment to that work. And I'm going to keep trying. I'll keep looking at what works. But knowing somebody well enough to have some trust and to know where the shared values are tells you which people you can work with on what topics, because everybody's somewhere on the continuum. Monica's breakfast after the bell, the floor speeches, there was one Republican that said, hungry children can't learn. We're rich enough. We don't know what goes on in a family. And we shouldn't be blaming the kid by withholding food. Another Republican said, I was hungry and it built my character. And the lunch ladies sometimes gave me scraps, and I don't think that government's job is to feed people when their parents goof off. 2 floor speeches. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but that was where the Republican two ends of the Republican argument against breakfast after the bell.
Sharon, again, we appreciate you being here, and I'm sorry that Brett Graham was not able to join us. He was invited. So with that, why don't you give us your final pitch for why voters should support you?
Being a state representative is the greatest honor I've ever had. Being able to learn new things and help people, part of what we do is run interference when people have a problem with the state government. I have a great assistant who knows people in every department. And when it's not a state problem, people don't know that. And we connect them up with the city or the county or wherever. So helping people and feeling like, and I feel lucky that I know that what we read about and hear about the other Washington isn't happening in our state. And I'm a proselytizer. I want people to know that civility exists, that people work together, people respect each other, people care about each other, and we don't have to agree on everything. And all of our governments are citizen-led. And it isn't rocket science, but we're too busy for everybody to know everything they need to know. And that's why it's complex. That's why it's a learning experience. Part of my job is to break it down for people. And anybody is welcome to come up and spend the day with me and shadow me and go to meetings with me in the people's house. And it is the people's house. And even behind closed doors, we call it the people's house.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Glad you could join us.
Thank you.